Hello crafty friends, it's Alicia of the Call Me Crafty Al YouTube channel, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing some cards that use up the leftovers from my first set of SheetLoad of cards this month. I hope you'll stick around and see what I'm going to make. Thank you so much for stopping by today. If this is your first time to my channel, I hope that by the end of this video, you'll be inspired to click on that subscribe button below and maybe even tap on that bell for notifications. If you're already a subscriber and regular viewer, welcome back. I'm so glad that you're here again. Last month, I stopped by with a video where I shared a look at how I made cards using the leftovers from the June 2020 SheetLoad of Cards. It was a big hit, many of you liked it, so I decided to come back this month and do it again. The cards I make in today's video are going to be using the leftovers from this set of 8 cards I made using the July 2020 SheetLoad of Cards. You can see on the cutting guides, you end up with quite a bit of CS1 left and even quite a bit of each of the pattern papers. And don't forget, if you want to download the latest SheetLoad of cards, I will have that video linked in the description box below. So here is a look at what I have left over from those cards. Today I'm going to do my best to only add card bases to what I make and maybe some white cardstock for the sentiments. Now right now I don't know what sentiments I'll use or if I'll use die cuts for that, but as I go along in the process, when I add a product, I will make sure to let you know about it. If I leave you with any questions, make sure to leave those in the comment section below and I'll get back to you just as soon as I can. If you share a picture on Instagram or a video here on YouTube and you make cards with your leftovers, I would love it if you would use a hashtag SheetLoadLeftovers, and that way I can come see what you've done with your extra bits this month. And speaking of joining me, my friend Danny is participating this month and she is sharing the cards she's made with the leftovers over on her blog. I will have her blog post linked below, so make sure to go check that out when you're done here and leave her some love. Let's get crafty! To get started today, I'm going to cut 2 pieces of white cardstock to 7 inches wide and leave the height at 8.5. I will be making 2 slimline cards, so once I cut these, I'm going to fold them in half to 8.5 inches wide by 3.5 inches tall. And I did save that excess from each piece, and you'll see that I use it later for more card bases. Next, I cut my blue cardstock, so I had 2 pieces that were 8 inches wide by 3 inches tall. Next, I got out my large pieces of pattern paper and I cut each of these so they were 7 3/4 inches wide, and then I cut 2 3/4 inches off the bottom of each piece. That left me with 4 pattern paper pieces in just a couple different sizes. I decided for the sentiment on today's cards that I would use this hello die. For these 2 cards, I will be cutting them out of white foam 2 times and then once out of each of the centers of the taller pieces of pattern paper. I started off my die cutting by cutting the hello out of the 2 foam pieces. The first one that I cut out, I ran it back and forth a few times on my die cutter, but this wasn't necessary as the second time I did it, it was just forward and back and it still cut out very nicely. Next, I stacked together the 2 pattern paper pieces, and because the center of these pieces will be covered by another pattern paper, I was able to make good use out of my paper without needing another piece for my sentiment. Next, I got out my art glitter glue and I adhered one of the pattern paper hellos to one of the foam bases. This is going to help these stand out from the background of the card. Once I have those in place, I just set them to the side under a stamp block to let them dry. While those were drying, I went ahead and started putting the card together itself. The first thing I did was add the blue cardstock piece centered on the card front, and then I took one of the larger pattern papers that I had die cut out of, and I placed that centered onto the blue cardstock. Finally, I added adhesive to the back of the other pattern paper, and this just got centered top to bottom on that first pattern paper piece. I did the same thing for both cards. Once my hellos were dry, it was time to finish the cards. I wanted to make a little base or somewhere for my hello to sit, so I got out these 2 scraps of pink cardstock and I cut them to approximately 4.5 inches wide. I cut a little fishtail in the end of these, and then they got adhered onto the smaller pattern paper aligned with the right side about 1/4 inch up from the bottom of that piece. Once I had both of those pink strips in place, I added my art glitter glue again to the back of the hello die cuts, and I adhered those to the cards and set them aside to dry. To finish off these first 2 cards, I got out some matte holographic sequins. I liked kind of the non-glossy finish on these, and I'm going to be adding 5 to the front of each card. I will be adding these using some mini glue dots that I have left over from paper pumpkin kits, and I just placed down 5 glue dots where I wanted my sequins. I pulled the release paper on each of those, and then I got out my quick pick tool to lift up the sequins and put those in place. I did this same process for the second card, and here is a close-up look at the finished pieces. For this next card, I decided to use the scrap of white cardstock that was left over from making those slimline card bases. This was 4 inches wide, so I cut it to 8 inches tall, so when it was folded, I would have a 4-inch square card. Now I know that if you sent these in an envelope that was a square, it would cost extra, but if I mail these, I will just send them in a regular envelope. Here you'll see that I cut and folded one of the scraps that was left, but later you'll see that I bring in that second white cardstock scrap and create a second card base. But until then, I got out each of the pattern paper scraps that was left over, and I cut those to 3 3/4 inches wide. I wasn't quite sure yet of the layout, but I was pretty sure that I would want these pieces to be that width, so while my trimmer was out, I went ahead and cut those. And here's a look at that second card that I was talking about. To start decorating these cards, I placed each of the light pink pattern papers at the top centered on the card base. Next, I placed one of the cactus papers at the bottom, and this was when I decided I needed some kind of divider between the 2 pattern papers. Because I had already adhered those down, I had to do a little extra cutting and a little finagling on the first card. And it wasn't the best idea, because you'll see there I had to cut off some extra while it was on the card front. But for the second one, I did it much more smarter. And that actually does not even sound much more smarter, but I think you get the point. I first adhered the blue strip to the back of the cactus paper and then placed it onto the card front. Next, I got out my scrap of vellum and chose a stitch circle die that filled as much of that as possible. And since I'll have my die cutter out, I went ahead and got out 2 more scraps of pattern paper and that same hello die from the first cards. I'll cut 2 of the pattern paper pieces at once, and then that circle from the vellum. Unfortunately, I only had 1 vellum circle and 2 cards. It wasn't a good size to measure it on my cutter and cut it from there, so first I folded it in half, and then I placed it back in the guillotine trimmer and cut it into 2 pieces. I want this vellum to help the hello stand out a little bit from the background. So on the first one, I put a little adhesive where the center of the vellum piece would be, and then later when I add adhesive to the vellum die cut, it will help hold the rest of that down. You'll notice on the second one that I placed it on top of the light pink pattern paper. Once those had dried a little bit, I got back out my art glitter glue and adhered each of the die cut words to the card fronts. Now I will have to say that it was about this time that I wished I would have cut each of these out of the foam. It was kind of hard to see these against the background, no matter if the vellum was there or not. So once those had dried, I had to figure out a way to help make those words stand out. So I got out a black and white gel pen and I just did a little hand stitching around the outside of each of the die cuts. This helped a little bit, but again, if I had it to do over, I would have used foam again. Just like with the first set of cards, I got out those same holographic matte sequins, and I'm going to add 3 to each card this time. I placed down those glue dots, pulled the release paper, and then added the sequins. And here's a look at the final cards. I hope you enjoyed getting to see the cards I made with this month's leftovers. Now don't forget to go visit Danny's blog to see what she created. Until my next video, I hope you're all having a crafty day. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch all the way to the end of the video. I hope now you'll consider clicking on one of the videos or playlists I have linked above, and if you're interested in any of the products or tools I used in today's video, I do have some links in the description box.